Hey, this is Matt Cain with the San Francisco Giants, and you guys are listening to Torture Cast.
You're listening to a podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. Let's go, Giants! With hosts Willie Dills, Chad King, Ben Lee, and Eric Nathanson. Dedicated to the greatest team in Major League Baseball, the San Francisco Giants. This is Torture Cast. Standing on time, not gonna stop. We came to play, ain't slowing down. Falling on, we're here to stay, and we're stomping on whatever's in our way. I'm feeling like a Giant tonight.
It's Thursday, February 8, 2018, and this is episode 133 of the Torture Cast, the podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. I'm your host, Chad King, and joining me from the Pecan Farm, I love saying that, no longer in the penis of the U.S., he's now in a very eclectic, gosh, who is that artist I'm blanking out on now? You know, the old time. Oh no, I meant the actual literal painting artist from the 40s and 50s, Norman Rockwell. Thank you, Brian, for
very much
firing
so.
on me. In the Norman Rockwell-esque Pecan Farm in rural Georgia is Eric Nathanson. What's up, Eric?
It is very Rockwellian here. I will say that we have a Dollar General as our only store in town, and we've already taken to calling it the General Store. So
That's nice.
All my basic needs are met for $19.50.
Now, we'll talk about the Giants in a second. I saw a post, and you were saying like there's like no stoplight in town, and or the furthest one away, the closest one is like miles away from your house. What's the deal with your downtown area, quote unquote?
It's one stop sign. It's a four-way stop. There's a store on one corner. There's a gas station on the other corner, and that's about it. You pass through town, heading to various places in Georgia. And stoplight, the closest one, I think, is about 6 or 7 miles away when you get near Moody Air Force Base.
Wow. That's pretty trippy, man. I mean, plenty of houses live or are located far away from stoplights. I just don't know many people that live there. So that's pretty cool.
I didn't either, and here I am, and it's working out so far. It's going to be a great place to watch baseball all year.
Well, it sounds like a much better place than you were before, so glad to hear that. And, man, you have been active, too. Eric has been pumping out content for us. He's written a couple articles we can get into at the end, but be sure to check out torturecast.com for a couple of recent pieces put up by Eric. They're really well written, so yeah, I should pay him, but I don't. So,
no, we're fans. This is a podcast by.
This is a podcast by and for fans. We have never been paid a dime. And by the way, we started, and I wasn't with the podcast then. It was founded by Ben and Willie and another guy who is no longer with the show. And I joined about 3 or 4 months after they started the podcast. But the inaugural podcast was in June 2011, shortly after their first World Series victory. And so, yeah, this June is going to be the 7-year anniversary of the podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, we've never been paid and we've never sought payment. So we thought about doing Patreons and those kinds of things. We just haven't done it yet because we know we need to probably produce more content to deserve that. But like Eric said, we are fans. This is why we do this.
And we represent the fans. And I hope fans out there know that and think that. There was a time a few years ago where I was just like, screw it. You know, I'm a fan. I'm not afraid to write with my heart on Torture Cast. We're obviously all Giants fans here. We're not having Dodger fans come over and read, Cubs fans come over and read the content. It's Giants fans. We're fans. So I'll always be giving the fan perspective. As much as I might know about baseball, I still bleed orange and black. So everything's going to come tinged with that.
No, absolutely. So I hope you guys enjoy the content that we do put out. But it looks like we are ramping up. Pitchers and catchers are reporting on February 14th, Valentine's Day. That's next week, man. We got 6 days, less than a week until they report. The full squad, of course, reports on February 19th. So, God damn it, I love this. Baseball is just around the corner. I just had my Little League draft for my son's baseball team. That's awesome. The weather in the Bay Area is unusually warm. It hit 81 degrees today here in the Bay Area. It was I just feel baseball in the air. It's a little earlier than I would have expected to feel this, but it's coming soon.
Well, baseball is front and center right now because, the Super Bowl was just last week. Then the Niners, locked up Jimmy G for many, many G's today.
Many G's for Jimmy G.
Yeah. And so the Giants are they get to take center stage in the Bay right now. I know the Dubs, they've kind of had an up and down at times season, but like everybody's kind of curious to see if this experiment works from the off season, So I think it's nice that the baseball season's jumping up early, even though it doesn't seem like all the teams have put together rosters yet.
So one of the first things I wanted to talk about tonight, and it came across the wire a couple of days ago, the Giants typically, or have always, only retired numbers of players that have been elected to the Hall of Fame. Now they are taking a step out of that line of thought, and they announced a couple of days ago that they are indeed going to retire Barry Bonds' number 25 in a day game, I believe, August 11th versus the Pirates. Ironically, of course, we know where Barry played before the Giants. And of course, they have they have McCutchen too from the Giants. That'll be an interesting day. So a lot of people were kind of taken aback by that, and the reason I say that is most Giants fans, I'd say a good 80 to 90%, that's my guesstimate, love Barry Bonds, and they think he should be in the Hall of Fame. It's a one-sided thing. You look at the rest of the country, the other 29 clubs, fans obviously think of him as a villain, and maybe rightly so. I don't know. We can talk about that another day. But the Giants have kind of stayed away from Bonds a little bit. He's been to spring training. He's made some appearances. They honored him with a plaque, but let's be honest, this plaque is a tiny little, 8.5 by 11 bronze piece way out in center field by the little apex between Triples Alley and center field. And I've never even walked up to see. You can't see that thing from the outfield or from the the press box or anywhere else in the park. So it's like they've acknowledged Bonds kind of like a redheaded stepchild, but they haven't really addressed it. But now they're finally starting to address it. I think the Hall is starting to soften a little bit. He has 4 years of eligibility left, and that may not be enough for him to get in the Hall, but I think the Giants are trying to do what they can, realizing that maybe they can push the Hall a little bit and also recognize Bonds. Not that that's the only reason they're doing this. But I think this is the Giants' way of kind of opening up the door just a little bit more by retiring his number. And the first number to be retired that belongs to a person not in the Hall of Fame.
It's I think the plaque last year, it was kind of one of those things where Bonds gets a plaque dedicated and everybody was kind of like, yay, okay. I mean, I tuned in, I live streamed it. Yay, okay, that's great. Barry, all right. But, he's not the same as the other guys on that wall. I mean, he helped build those walls. He's just a different pantheon of his own in Giants lore. And I find it interesting. They've slowly taken him back in the fold over the years, and they've decided to go full court press this year, retire his number. I love that they're doing it against the Pirates. I think it's kind of cool for Bonds, himself. Those are the only two organizations he ever played for. So he gets to do it in front of, those teams' fans. But it's something that didn't even strike me until right now as you were talking. They're coming off a 98-loss season. I have to wonder if that accelerated the process. And if it did, I don't care. I absolutely don't care. If the Hall of Fame voting accelerated the process, that's fine. I don't care. It's something that should be done. Bonds should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. 25 should have been retired 6 years ago.
I agree with you. I really do. Obviously, we all think he should be a Hall of Famer. There's a lot of players. I sat down and I watched a Hall of Fame roundtable on MLB Network, and they had a lot of ex-players on that. There's about 6 or 7 people around the table. It also had Mad Dog Russo, which he's a huge Giants fan, although I can't stand the guy. I think he's kind of a douchebag and a blowhard. But every single one of them was against Bonds going in the Hall. There were, 2 writers, a radio host, and I think 3 players. And the players, of course, their rationale was, I did everything clean. And what this guy did was cheat. And I'm sorry, I don't care if he was a Hall of Famer before he started doing drugs, which a lot of people make that argument, of course. I don't care. Once you cheat, you don't belong in the Hall. The writers kind of felt the same way. And so it was unanimous in this Hall, or this round table. But Obviously, there's plenty of other riders. He got up to, 57%, 58% this year? So more than half the voters voted him in, and there seems to be this, not wave, but slow wave, slowly building wave, of some of the old-timers basically timing out of Hall eligibility in terms of their BBWAA credentials, and young riders coming in who are a little bit more progressive in their views of Barry Bonds. I just don't know if, again, those 4 years are going to be enough left for him. But they're saying, look, yeah, I think he cheated, but I also think a lot of other players cheated that are already in the Hall. I also think that there's a huge gray area of players where, yeah, maybe he did. Like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a name, Bagwell, right? I mean, he was suspected of a lot because of his stature and his hulk and his injuries that he was prone to later in his career. But he was voted into the Hall because, again, there wasn't any solid proof. Not that Barry Bonds was ever convicted either. It's just that, everyone assumes that he's guilty. So there's this weird gray area, and it's hard for me to put myself in those shoes. I think everyone has a right to their vote, but at the same time, you either gotta reject everyone who's ever suspected of PEDs, or you gotta accept everyone suspected of PEDs, right? Because to me, it's hard to draw the line as a voter going, yeah, he was suspected, but the circumstantial evidence isn't very strong in my opinion. But over here, there's like 5% more evidence, and so I think I'm gonna not vote for this guy. It's weird. It's unfortunate.
It's not even the writers that have a tough time with it. I mean, the Giants have done a spectacular job of, they separated themselves from Barry for the first few years after he retired. Well, after nobody signed him.
Well, and he still could have played, man. It was amazing.
Yeah, technically, he
had another couple years at least.
He could have hit 800, but nobody signed him. Yeah, nobody signed him, and then they didn't bring him back in the fold for a few years. And then they slowly started to bring him back. And there's organizations just like writers out there, like the Cubs. They don't know what to do with Sammy Sosa. That guy's been ostracized from that organization forever. And let's be honest, if Barry's a Hall of Famer, guys like Sosa, McGuire, all of them, it's the same blanket statement.
Absolutely.
He did what other guys were doing. And so it's tough, I think, for just any baseball individual to come to terms with either, saying, okay, it was a part of the game and I want to accept that, or, it'll always be cheating and I'll never change my view. As Giants fans, we didn't have that issue. I love Barry Bonds. I had a 25 Bonds jersey. I stood and cheered when Bonds came to the plate. I was watching those videos and seeing the crowd reaction, see how much the Giants fans just loved that time. And you can't take that away. No amount of saying he was a cheater or this or that will ever take that away. And that's what makes what the Giants are doing by finally retiring 25 the right thing to do. And it also makes me look forward, and this isn't written anywhere, but who else can you think of is going to get their number retired by the Giants in the future? I mean, after Bonds, it's got to be current players and Bochy.
Yeah, it's got to be Bochy, Buster Posey, Madison Bumgarner. Those, I mean, not that
That's
if they quit today, they would have their number retired, but they're on the trajectory to have that happen. Bochy, I think he already is, but because he's a Hall of Fame manager right now. There was obviously talk about Will Clark for years, but the fact that there's been multiple players, Eli Whiteside, Andrew McCutchen, other players in the past that have worn 22, because no one has worn 25 in the last 10 years. Right. It's kind of a sign that, Will Clark was one of our great first basemen during the 80s and 90s, and that's about it, right? There's no plaque, there's no statue, there's no number retirement. So
he doesn't meet the required criteria, which was always being voted into the Hall of Fame.
It was the Hall of Fame, so... And that is interesting when you bring that up, because now that Barry Bonds is in, assuming he does not get into the Hall and his number is always retired at AT&T Park, does that open the door for past players that may get their number retired in the future, like a Will Clark or someone else?
Like a Tim Lincecum? No, it doesn't happen. Barry is unto of himself,
No, he's so much bigger than than Lincecum and Clark. And I know there's Giants fans right now probably screaming at me saying, no way, the freak is way bigger than Bonds. It's like, look, either you're way too young to know, or or you think, 2 Cy Youngs is bigger than 7 MVPs and the all-time home run king.
Or a ballpark. I mean, he's the reason.
Yeah, no, he built the ball. You're absolutely right. He built
he's
the ballpark.
the reason.
Okay, let's flash back also, because, you lived in Florida. Here I am, it's 1991, 1992. I graduated high school in 1991, so picture how old I am. Major Giants fan, obviously huge Will Clark fan. He's still on the team at the time. And then suddenly Bob Lurie, the owner of the Giants, is talking about moving the franchise to Tampa Bay to play in the Trop. And I mean, we just lost our shit out here in California. We just said, what? You can't take away this team. And it came down to the 11th hour until Peter McGowan, the CEO of Safeway, stepped in with his team of investors and purchased the Giants expressly for the intent of keeping the Giants in San Francisco. And that was in 1992. And then, of course, the next year they signed Barry Bonds. And then the rest is history. And you're right. What he did for this franchise after we all thought it was 100% certain they're going to Tampa Bay. I was thinking to myself what Oakland Raider fans are thinking right now, or St. Louis Rams were thinking last year, is that's it. My team's gone. Like, am I even going to follow them anymore? I feel like they're turning their back on me. But yeah, McGowan came in, saved the franchise. That perpetuated itself into the Bonds signing, which then the success of the mid to late 90s, ramped up to the passage of, not the passage because it was privately financed, but the first privately financed ballpark in the last 30 years in AT&T. And I remember driving by that park in 1999, seeing it go up, seeing the skeleton of that stadium going up, and just being so excited. And now here to think, 18 years after the park was built, we're standing here with 3 world championships.
Right.
And Barry Bonds' number finally getting retired. I mean, you're absolutely right to say that this is the house that Bonds built. It really is. And so the Giants owe a lot to him. And that was even before his PE days. I mean, the stadium was built in 2000 or opened in 2000. And, he was suspected of starting shortly after the McGuire-Sosa chase in 1998, right? So maybe he started in 99 or 2000, so...
Yeah, but they already had everything they needed by that point because it opened in 2000.
That was my point, is that everything was done PED free before that.
You got to think that, though, part of the reason those investors and the financing came together was because the team was always going to be in contention as long as Barry Bonds was a part of it. It wasn't only until the later years that they weren't going to be in contention. So they knew they were going to be selling the ballpark out. For the first, however many years it would be, turned out to be 7, 8 total seasons at AT&T. They knew they were investing in him, and he's the reason that they had the opportunity to, like you said, win those 3 world championships. It's just a shame he never got one himself. But hey, he's going to finally be right next to his godfather, Willie Mays. So
we can all cry about 2002. He should have had it then, but and he single-handedly almost got that team to that ring.
I got 8 home runs. He was the first guy ever. 8 home runs.
Of course, people now would say, well, yeah, duh, PEDs. Duh. So let's not split hairs about that right now. So, yeah, Eric wrote a great piece about that. Check it out on torturecast.com. About the history of Barry Bonds and some amazing numbers. In fact, I was there. I was going through those numbers and I was reminiscing on some of them I'd even forgotten about. But I was there for home run number 73 at AT&T. It was a knuckleballer Russ Springer that Bonds went deep off of. So I saw every home run was record setting at that point. But I saw the final record setting home run, which is cool. I could say that I was there. And
it was a fascinating at-bat because the ball floated in there. Bonds was totally out on his front foot.
All his weight. On his front foot.
Yeah, when all his weight was on it, and I
thought it was a fly ball. Get going.
It's all hands. You just dinked it out into the arcade.
And that was a horrible well, I shouldn't say a horrible swing. It was a home run, but it wasn't a good-looking swing. But it went out. I was also there for 600. at AT&T, which is pretty cool because that was before the video board days, or the big video board. But all the confetti coming down, the streamers, the speech, the whole thing. It was really cool. I've been there for a few other momentous Bonds home runs, too many to count. That's when I used to go to the park as a fan all the time when it wasn't as expensive as it is now, and I didn't have kids and I could actually go.
See, I'm jealous because the one moment on there that I got to say I was at was when he hit his 50th home run in 2001 at Wrigley to become the fastest player to ever hit 50 home runs, to hit 50 home runs for the first time in his career. I didn't know like all that. I'm sure I heard it on SportsCenter that night, but I was there that day in a Bonds jersey, and he homered at Wrigley. It was just fantastic. And it was just weird
that we didn't know each other then. We each saw a home run from that season. There you go.
Yeah, I think that's cool as shit.
23 homers apart.
Yeah, right.
All right, so let's move on to some Major League Baseball news. So one thing that I've found interesting, I've been talking to this guy at the gym who's a huge Dodger fan, and he knows I'm a huge Giants fan, and so we always banter about in the gym during warm-ups. It's a fun conversation, but we often talk about neutral things like just baseball and rules and pace of play and free agent signings and all that stuff. And so we got to talking about the lack of signings this year, and we kept saying that this has been a pretty cold stove. I mean, the Giants have done their fair share with McCutchen and Longoria, et cetera, but there are a lot of big name free agents still out on the market, and camps open here in less than a week. This is really unprecedented. This has not happened in recent modern baseball history. And so, I'm not here to judge because I don't think I know enough about the information from both sides. But what is interesting is there's been a little bit of tension between the Major League Baseball Player Association and Major League Baseball itself. And just in the last couple of days, there's been some statements flying back and forth from Tony Clark, the representative from the PA, and of course Major League Baseball. I think I have the quotes up here somewhere.
I was literally doing the same thing.
So here we go.
Back to look.
This is really interesting. So Tony Clark is the executive director of the Players Union, released this statement. Pitchers and catchers will report to camps in Florida and Arizona in 1 week. A record number of talented free agents remain unemployed in an industry where revenues and franchise values are at record highs. Spring training has always been associated with hope for a new season. This year, a significant number of teams are engaged in a race to the bottom. This conduct is a fundamental breach of the trust between a team and its fans and threatens the very integrity of the game. So there was a nice, shot across the bow at Major League Baseball saying that, they're trying to get to the bottom. I like how he said that. And of course, Major League Baseball, which rarely releases statements such as the following, did reply with the following. Quote, "Our clubs are committed to putting a winning product on the field for their fans. Owners own teams for one reason. They want to win. In baseball, it has always been true that clubs go through cyclical, multi-year strategies directed at winning. It is common at this point in the calendar to have large numbers of free agents unsigned. What is uncommon is to have some of the best free agents sitting unsigned even though they have substantial offers, some in 9 figures. It is the responsibility of players' agents to value their clients in a constantly changing free agent market based on factors such as positional demand, advanced analytics, blah, 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 blah." And it goes a few sentences further, and then it says, to lay responsibility on the clubs for the failure of some agents to accurately assess the market is unfair, unwarranted, and inflammatory. And, of course, you had players like Justin Turner and Alex Wood chiming in, totally bashing MLB. It's really, really interesting. What I find kind of illuminating about this is we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, at least not fully. But here's some of the free agents still available. Okay, we have Yu Darvish, J.D. Martinez, Jake Arrieta, Mike Moustakas, Lance Lynn, Alex Cobb, and Greg Holland. Those are probably the top 6 or 7 free agents still available. And you go, yeah, why haven't those guys been signed? Well, here's the thing: is that according to all reports, all of these guys have received offers from various teams. Some of them in very, very large numbers, like J.D. Martinez, 5 years, 125 million from Boston, right? That's 25 million a year. And so although we don't know the numbers of all of these offers, which is true, and maybe some of those offers are a little low, we do know some of these offers. And every indication is that these are fair market rate offers as far as I can tell. So my question is, what are the players actually upset about? Are they upset because maybe there's 2 or 3 offers that really are lowballing? Or do they view a lowball as like, JD Martinez deserves 30 a year, not 25, and so none of us are going to sign? What do you think's going on here?
I think the players kind of painted themselves in a corner. They signed an agreement which, stipulated that if teams went over a certain number, that they would have to pay a luxury tax. And they thought that would keep the competitive balance, and that teams like the Royals, who have won a World Series, and the Rays, who haven't, would be able to compete with the other clubs. And so they would get the overflow revenue. But what they didn't account for was teams like the Giants. It's actually funny because the Giants are a horrible example in all this, because they have been one of the smartest teams this offseason. They've been able to maneuver and stay under the luxury tax threshold, as well as making moves. Other teams can't do that, so they're doing what Tony Clark is saying as a rebuild. But they painted themselves in a corner because now that threshold is there and teams don't want to pay the 3rd and 4th year penalty, the market has changed slightly. And so, maybe they're getting $2 million less a year than they thought that they were worth. And I'm not a guy who sides with the owners at all. I'm totally a player guy, get your money. Yeah. But it sounds like they've kind of done it to themselves. I was reading The Athletic, and Ken Rosenthal had a piece, and Brandon Moss was talking in the piece. And he says in so many words that they gave the owners an excuse not to pay the top free agents because they bargained that in themselves. And you kind of have to fight it. There was talk of them, a whole union saying that we won't report for spring training if people aren't signed by then. And there's way too many penalties that come with that. There's the talk, and I think you noted it, of a free agent camp where players can come and train, and if they get signed or looked, whatnot. But I mean, the big guys, they're not getting signed because teams don't want to pay that much money anymore. I don't think it's unfair to them, and I think Tony Clark is just going to bat for his players. He's just coming in and saying, this isn't fair, and he's got to say what he's got to say, and I don't blame him. Tony played for 15 years. He's just going to take the player side and say, this is what we need. But the way that the agreement is structured, it could take 2-3 years for this all to get sussed out.
Yeah, I think so. And I forgot to mention Eric Hosmer. They're saying he's kind of Exhibit A for Rob Manfred in the sense of saying it's the players or the agents and not the teams, because apparently the Padres have offered him 7-year, 140, and then the Royals have upped it to 147. So we're talking about Eric freaking Hosmer earning $21 million a year. Eric Hosmer, he's a fine player. I'm not trying to bash him. Is he worth more than $21 million a year? In my view, absolutely not. No way in the world. And yet he hasn't signed. So, and yes, we don't know all the information. Maybe he's one of the outliers. But it is cases like that where you kind of point to, well, some of these free agents are getting very fair, more than fair offers. So don't say it's the agents or the teams. But you're right. I mean, that is a really good point, bringing up about the luxury tax. I mean, you can kind of think of the Giants in a microcosm, is they're right up against the 197 cap, and I submit to you, if the Giants, well, this would be true of any team, but let's just look at the Giants in their own little world. If the Giants were not up against the luxury tax, they would absolutely have been offering for some of these guys, especially a guy like JD Martinez or Yu Darvish or Jake.
There's no question about it.
Or Lance Lynn, right?
Yeah,
they need another starter. They need another outfielder. I mean, they would be offering for these guys, but it's going to bump them over the top. And so that $25 million contract is now going to cost them $30 or $35 million because of the tax. So they're not going to do that. And so that's what a lot of teams kind of up against that bubble are. Now, that doesn't mean that's true for teams like the Oakland Athletics, who are at the bottom of the barrel of payroll at like $89 million or something like that, where they're doing the opposite, and they're just never going to sign a guy like, they're the farm teams, basically. They're the teams that develop the players that eventually get released to free agency to be signed, or of course they get traded for prospects, and the cycle begins anew. But there are plenty of teams that are at or near the cap, or even just over the cap, where they can't do it. They can't sign a guy for $20-25 million a year because the penalty is so extreme. It's like living in California. I just paid my car registration today, my renewal. I could not believe what I had to pay, $450 to the DMV, because the state passed a law last year to raise $52 billion over 10 years for roads and infrastructure and all that, and they tacked it on gas tax, which I noticed because that came in November, and now the car registration fee, which is an additional like $180 a year. So it's little things like that where it's like, that's what these teams are trying to avoid. So you can't blame them wholly, but I would love to sit down with Tony Clark and other players, hypothetically speaking, to really understand, okay, so for every Eric Hosmer out there who's getting what I perceive as a very, very good deal, tell me about the deals that you think the owners are screwing the players on. Because every single one of these players has apparently at least received an offer, but all the details aren't known. So let me know. How bad are they? Because the data that we have right now, what is known on the public side, I'm kind of siding with the owners on this one, which, like you said, is unusual for me. Usually
I don't like doing that. Yeah,
I don't either, because obviously they're more about the money than the players are, and they usually screw the players. And so maybe they're getting screwed in some way that we don't know, and that's what I would like to find out. But I don't know. I think these figures are pretty damn fair for what we've seen so far. So interesting stuff.
So
but
it begs the question: which team is willing to open their wallet? There's some teams that have taken advantage. The Brewers are taking advantage. They signed they made the trade with the Marlins. Then they signed Lorenzo Cain.
Yeah, they got Cain too. Yep. And
right, there's been talk of Darvish possibly out there. The Brewers are just like screwed because they're not a team that's been up against that tax for a few years. So if you make a run at it and you know that your contracts will go through the expiration of the current agreement, then you won't get penalized anymore. But teams like literally the Red Sox, Yankees, Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers, I can't think of an offseason move we heard the Dodgers make.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We heard everything about the Giants, nothing about the Dodgers.
I talked to my buddy about that, and I said, have you guys done anything this offseason? He said no. Not really.
Yeah, that's
pretty much set, so they're ready to go. I mean, partially because they're way over the tax, but they have most of their eggs, lined up in the basket. They're ready to go. So, yeah, interesting stuff. You mentioned this before, but of course, the Players Association is looking into a spring training facility for free agents. Now, I don't know enough about this, only that they said they were looking into a couple of facilities to house, some of these free agents, a whole pool of free agents. They could, I guess, play inter-squad games or be their own team and play other teams. I don't really fully understand that, but regardless of how that functionally would work, I mean, this isn't like Tim Lincecum. Oh, I didn't even put that in the notes, by the way. Having a side session for scouts. I mean, we know who these players are. Teams know who these players are. They don't need to play at spring training to showcase their talents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, apparently they want to stay in baseball shape, but trainers can't be there. Right, certain trainers can't be there. They're not going to have the same kind of support system they'd get at a major league, spring training camp.
That's what they were looking at. They were looking at hiring coaches and training staff for temporary support for these guys. So they have guys to ice them down, towel boys and Gatorade boys and coaches and pitching coaches and all that stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I guess there's a few major league, ex-major league coaches that would be willing to do that for a couple of bucks. But I don't know. It seems weird. To me, it seems more like a PR thing. It's more like the Players Association wanting to have a big neon sign saying, hey, look at us. Look at all these free agents that haven't been signed. This is a problem. It's not about it's not about the players. It's not about getting them in baseball shape. I think it's more about the PR stunt. That's
Look what it's come to. Look what you've made us do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we only have bread and water for dinner. This is what we have to do to sustain ourselves.
Meanwhile, they're getting a per diem and they're totally fine.
They're totally fine. Man. So interesting story there. All right, so I think we covered most of what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, pretty much. The Giants season, is kicking off. It generally seems to kick off with FanFest, and for the last 2-3 years, you've been able to head over to FanFest Media Day, and you get to do that again tomorrow.
I have gone every year since 2013.
Shit, that's a lot.
This will be my sixth time going. And 2013, by the way, check out torchcast.com and the YouTube link, or go to YouTube and check out our channel. We have lots of videos up there from previous media days. That's pretty much most of the videos we've ever posted there. We're not active on YouTube. In February, we are. So expect to see more videos tomorrow. But it's really cool now that I've built up this library of, I don't think, there's not videos of every single year I was there. I did a couple of years where I just did audio only. And those are all in our archives on torchcast.com and, of course, on Podomatic. So you can search them there. But there are quite a few video interviews. I'd say at least 3 of the 5 previous years. I have quite a few video interviews up. Certainly video interviews of Tim Lincecum and Buster Posey, Bruce Bochy, Brandon Crawford, Madison Bumgarner, Ryan Vogelsong, Hunter Pence. You go down the list, Sergio Romo. It's really, really cool. In fact, one of my Facebook memories that popped up today was from 5 years ago, the 2013 Media Day, in which they had won their second World Series just previous, so everybody was in good spirits, and Tim Lincecum came out sporting the short dew and the glasses. And Mark Ibanez, our local sportscaster here for KTVU, led off the 10 o'clock sports wrap with talking about Media Day. And I have this little video clip because they were showing, Buster Posey with some reporters, and then the camera walking towards Tim Lincecum. And it's me and Wendy Thurm standing in front of Tim Lincecum interviewing him. So it's like my 3 seconds on sports TV that I've been on as one of the background reporters. But
that's funny.
It is really an interesting, it's like speed dating. It really is. For those of you that don't know, basically what they do is they take the suite level, the 200 level or whatever, a section of it, and the big players get the big suites. So you get your, Bruce Bochy and Buster Posey and Madison Bumgarner and those guys. They are in the suites. And so you walk in. Right when the players come out, by the way, each player is only available for about 30 to 45 minutes, and the whole event lasts only about 2 hours. So they kind of stagger them. So not all the players are out at the same time. Those are the big guys, and what I typically do is I let all of the news cameras go in and get their 10 seconds of audio because there's a mad rush. What I do is they have all these little cocktail bar tables with bar stools sitting outside for basically all the kind of medium to bench players and coaches. So that's where, in the past you've seen your Marvin Bernards and Gregor Blancos and those guys kind of sitting out at these little cocktail tables. And they sit there on their phones just waiting for someone to come up to them to talk to them. It's kind of sad because there's not a lot of conversation going on with the bench players or a Ron Wotus or a Sean Dunston, believe it or not. Those guys are usually kind of sitting alone and not talking to anyone because everyone.
So, Sean, how much video did you watch this offseason? I mean, what do you ask him?
Yeah, I know exactly. That's the thing, right? And so typically what I do is I let the main networks hit the main players for about 15 minutes, and then typically if you look at our videos over the past few years, it's just me and maybe one other reporter in a room with Madison Bumgarner or Buster Posey or Tim Lincecum or whoever it's been, Brandon Crawford, Michael Morse. We had a great interview with him a few years ago. It's kind of a one-on-one interview for like 5 to 10 minutes. It's really, really cool. It's definitely the best environment I've been in for player interviews because we have done it after the games as well. But that's when it is the crowd of reporters over several of the main players. And even though you can get a one-on-one with someone, it's like 2 minutes or less. They're trying to change. They want to go shower. They want to go eat. They want to go home. They don't want to talk about it, especially if it's a bad game, or if they didn't even do anything in the game. They're just, kind of watched it. So this is really cool because this is when everybody's fresh. Everybody's still 0-0. Everybody's got a chance for the World Series. They're just in their street clothes. They're just chilling. So it's a really remarkable experience. And I think our Buster Posey interview from 2013, in which Willie asked him about catcher face, which you have to go check that out to understand what that means, is that get 25,000 views, which is interesting because we don't promote it, but people, love Buster Posey. So,
well, I mean, who's not searching for Buster Posey on YouTube?
I know, right?
I go to bed every night searching for Buster Posey on YouTube.
Yeah, well, 25,000 views over 5 years really isn't that much.
That's all me. It's really just all me every night searching for Buster Posey on YouTube.
But it's really, really cool stuff, and so I'm planning to do some more video tomorrow and audio, and hopefully I can get some stuff up pretty quick. So typically we get some responses for questions to ask the players every year. We've gotten some this year, but not particularly good questions. So
we're not asking Brandon Crawford about his hair. It's that's a line in the sand.
That's what. So they have this little group of junior high or high school kids that come in and they get to do their little interviews. There's some select thing that happens every year. Those are the questions for those kids. They can ask them, what do you eat for breakfast every day? Yeah, what do you put in your hair, Brandon? That's not going to happen.
Chad's going to have to stand in the clubhouse at another point this season. Therefore, he cannot ask the man about his hair products.
Cannot.
I mean, you don't have the same respect. Brandon's going to see you. You walk up and it's like, oh yeah, it's a hair product guy, and you don't want that. Who wants that?
Nope. Don't want that. Don't want that label. So anyway, look for that. Follow us on torturecast.com, or actually probably on Twitter tomorrow, because I'm going to be tweeting quite a bit from Media Day. And also, man, you got to check out Eric's writing. He has been just pumping out some really high quality stuff. It's just amazing. He's just a wonderful writer and just a passionate Giants fan. Sucks that he's a Bears fan, but that's the way it goes.
Hey, they're going to be good. We're going to see some Niners-Bears playoff games in like 2 years, and the Bears are finally good, I think.
Maybe, right? Yeah, I mean...
Because the Niners are going to be good, but the Bears, I mean, who knows?
I still can't believe Jimmy G. I was thinking he was, max is 25 a year, right? That was like what everyone is going for, and he got 137. So it's like, I know it's 77 guaranteed, but it's like, are you kidding me? The dude's like started, 8 NFL games.
But he's legit. He's totally legit.
No, I'm a huge Niner fan. I think he's legit. I think he's legit. And so basically you have to ask yourself this question. Do I think he's worth $27 million a year? No, I don't think he is. But what's the alternative? If you don't offer him that, he walks, he becomes a free agent, he signs with someone else, and then you're left with bupkis, right? So you got to do it. You got to do it because you don't have anyone else. And the Niners have sucked for the last 3-4 years, and so they need to do this because, my God, he took a 1-9 team and won 6 in a row. Or sorry, 1-10, 5 in a row. 1-10 team won 5 in a row. I mean, who does that? Just one player did that. That's crazy.
The Niners are going to be the hot pick next year. All the pundits are going to be picking the Niners to do things.
Yeah, the early NFL odds, they jumped all the way to 10th on the Super Bowl odds to win the Super Bowl. I mean, they were like at 28 or whatever, a while ago. So, yeah, one guy making the difference. But
well, hey, the Eagles were probably like. Yep, absolutely. I was going to say the Eagles were probably long shots too at the beginning of the year. So, every season's a new. You're totally right though. That was Bonds. He changed everything.
He did. So, anything else you want to pimp, Eric?
No, just I circled some dates on the Giants' schedule. Check them out. As he said, I wrote about Bonds. And after the weekend with FanFest, as spring training gets going, I'm gonna sprinkle in a few things as well. Make sure we keep that side of things going. It's been good to, like I said, I'm a fan of the Giants, and I'm always gonna write from that perspective. So I can't help.
It has been good as of late, and for those of you going to FanFest, hey, if you want to submit some tweets, you want to send us some tweets, you want to send us some photos or videos, feel free to do so. I would have loved to have made it out there. I haven't been to FanFest in about 3 or 4 years. It is a great time, but unfortunately I'm going tomorrow, and I have a family, and I can't take 2 days in a row at the park. And I think I'm going to choose the day where I can actually talk to the players.
Right.
Rather than mingle in the stands. So anyway, check us out on torchcast.com. We are back on iTunes, by the way. We had a little blip for about a month and a half where our old podcast host had some issues. We switched, and we've switched back. It's a long story. I won't get into it. But everything is as it was. So you can check us out there. Check us out on Facebook. And I think that's about all the places that we are collectively. Individually, you can follow myself at ChadK21, Eric at 2OutHits, that's with the number 2, Willie at Willie Dills, and of course Ben at Fried Duck. Hopefully those guys, they've been busy. Hopefully we can get them back on the show relatively soon. Until episode 134, this has been Chad and Eric for episode 133. Until next time, we'll see you then. Boom.
A big thank you to everybody for listening to the TortureCast, the podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. Follow us on Twitter at TortureCast. You can also like us on Facebook or check out our blog at torturecast.com. I also want to say thank you to Ashcon and Bailey for letting us use their song Feeling Like a Giant for our intro. For Ben Lee and Chad King, my name is Willie Dills saying, we'll see you next time.